Hey everybody, Joe from Treadmill Heroes here, and I'm working on a True CS 550 treadmill today. We're going to throw a running belt on this thing, open this thing up, kind of give a few tips along the way, especially with these side step rails. They can be kind of a pain in the butt if you don't know what you're doing. And yeah, let's wrench on the tread. So first thing we have to do is tip this thing on its side. And you'll notice on the back side here, it's kind of dirty underneath of this thing, so we're going to get it nice and cleaned and refurbished. But you will see these bolts right here, these bolt heads, all the way up and down the frame. You got to loosen those up, and when you loosen them up, it's almost like a little T-clamp up top that sucks the saddle down onto the frame. You loosen these, it's going to release that T nut up, and the whole side rail will slide off. Let me show you. So loosen these things up with a half inch socket, and they're pretty tight. It's definitely the right size. And even after the first one I loosen up, I wouldn't take it out all the way. I would just loosen it. You're gonna find that it's already getting loose after you loosen up one or two bolts. A couple turns is adequate. And then this side saddle just slides right off. Do not pound on this thing with a mallet or anything like that. It's not jammed on there tight. It's just held on. I'm sure there's a more I doubt these are called T-nuts or whatever, but I like to call them that, but here they are. These are these little T-anchors that hold that side rail down. So once you loosen it, those will come off, or those will come loose. The side saddle comes off. And then when you go to replace your belt, you gotta loosen, or you gotta take your deck off, and you've got these deck anchor bolts right here. Up and down. So we're going to replace the belt, we're going to flip the deck, and we should be good to go. Okay, now that we've got the side saddles off, we got to get the deck flipped over on this. These are flippable decks, so if you look underneath of this thing, it's going to be nice and smooth, which I'll show you once you get the deck off. But these are your deck bolts. You need a 4mm Allen wrench. Boom, boom, boom. But right up in here, this guy can't get in there. Can't get in there with your Allen wrench to get that last one out. So what you need to do is you need to remove the upright bolts that go through the plastic that are right here. Here and here. You do that on both sides, then this top part will fold down. Set it down nice and soft. And that'll give you just enough clearance to get your Allen wrench in here. Right here to get your deck bolt out. On the both front ones. Once that's out, then you can flip the deck. It's also worth noting that sometimes a reported issue on these treadmills, and really treadmills in general, is kind of a banging or knocking sound when somebody is walking or running on the treadmill. A lot of times the deck itself, these deck bolts, they get loose from the cushions underneath. So there's a little bit of play and the deck is kind of slapping on top of the deck cushions. So it's always a good thing to make sure that your deck bolts are tight. Like as I'm taking these out, some of them are nice and snug and some of them are kind of loose. So it's also worth noting on these treads and treadmills in general, if you get like a knocking or a clicking sound while somebody's walking or running on the treadmill, check the bolts that attach the deck down to the cushions underneath the deck. Because like on this one here, as I'm taking it off, these bolts are really loose. And the problem is if they're loose, that means there's some play in the deck and you're gonna get some clicking when someone's stepping on this. So a good practice when you're doing general maintenance on a treadmill or trying to determine if there's a noise or a click, check the deck bolts and make sure that they're nice and snug. This almost took a full turn to snug it up. So as we're taking these out, I got to thinking about that. Now another thing on these True treadmill decks specifically, the front two deck bolts on each side, those just thread in. Yeah, these are really loose. Typically you don't want to see deck bolts that loose. So I'm going to take out this front one here in real time. And then I'm going to show you the back deck bolts. Also, as you're taking out your deck bolts, notice the length. In some instances, like all four of these front ones are the same length, so you can put those up there. But sometimes the deck bolts are different lengths based on where it needs to go, you know, once it goes through the deck. These back ones here, if you go to loosen them up and unthread them, they're super tight, you can't get them out. So a lot of times, people just sit here and crank and crank and crank until they round out the head of the deck bolt. The back ones here actually have a nut on the underneath side. So what you need to do once you fold this down to get the front ones out, fold the upright back up into place, put your deck bolts back in there, just one maybe on each side. You don't have to get it tight, just thread it through to hold it upright. And then you've got to turn it on its side to get underneath of there to get to the deck bolt nut. So you put your socket on one side here, you got your Allen wrench on the other. And yeah, I'm using a great big impact gun. I know the comments are gonna say use a socket wrench, but I'm kind of a renegade that way. So we zip the nut off of there, and we do that on all four of them. Pops it right off, top and bottom. And then you're going to be able to take your deck off. Now all four of my deck nuts are out of the bottom there. I can turn my tread back upright. Now you can thread the bolts out of the deck, because they still thread through the frame. That frame bracket has threads tapped through it. The nut is just there to hold it in place. They don't put that on the front with the nut on the back side, because you've got the deck cushions up front there that need to allow it to flex a little bit. So you're actually threading this into the deck cushion up front that's underneath of it. Where back here you're threading it onto the frame. Think of this as like a diving board, right? The back of the diving board is static and the front has to give a little bit on the deck cushion. So you can anchor the back side down while the front side is into the cushions. Now that you got all your deck bolts out, deck comes right off of there, and we have a nice, smooth back side of the deck. This treadmill deck can be flipped. One way I can tell that is obviously it's got that smooth melamine surface on the bottom of it, just like on the top, but also they tapered these holes here. So they wouldn't have tapered these holes for the bolt to sit nice and flush unless it was designed to be flipped over. So now all we got to do is just flip it over. I'm just going to take a dry rag, wipe off all the dust, the cobwebs, normal stuff that gets underneath this tread. And while I have it off, I'm gonna really clean the whole frame inside here. It's a good time to get into all these little crevices. You got all kinds of dirt and hair and just other junk. It's good to get it nice and clean before somebody comes in and buys this and takes it either to their home or their facility. Once you have your deck off, this is another good time to inspect the deck cushions. That's these guys right here. So these things wobble around. They're rubber, kind of like a bouncy ball. And you'll see two of them here have threads here and here. That's where the deck bolt threads through that I was telling you about. But it's also good, they're going to inspect these, make sure they're not cracked, make sure they're not smashed down from all that impact. Sometimes they'll, different climates, wherever they're sitting, sometimes they'll crack and get all messed up. And you can actually replace these deck cushions. There's a nut on the bottom side here that you can't really see, but you can take that nut off and then these just pull right out of the hole and you can replace these. You can easily get these from your friends over at Fitness Graveyard. So I'm just using a microfiber towel in here and I'm just wiping off all the little junk in here and stuff that you can't reach when the deck is on the treadmill. I try to avoid using any cleaners inside of here. Usually just a damp towel will work, and sometimes you don't even need to get it damp. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to get any cleaner on top of these deck cushions here. If you've ever heard the term squeaky clean, if you get cleaner on these and as the deck is rubbing on top of these deck cushions, you might get a little squeak. And it'll be really hard to figure out where that noise is coming from. So I tend to just use a dry towel underneath it here, especially if you're just talking about dust and cobwebs and stuff. I mean, the way I see it, why go to all that work and have this exposed and not clean it up real good? Take that rear roller out of there because I'm going to need to take that out anyway. Just put the running belt on, but yeah, wiping this down. Nice, smooth, brand new deck surface. The deck is nice and straight, so it's not warped or anything. This is going to flip over real nice. So I'm removing the rear roller off of this thing. Normally the rear roller would already be off. Same with the front roller with the belt off. But because I just cut this old belt off, I didn't take the rollers off. But I've said this in multiple videos before. Make sure before you remove your rear roller, you mark it from one side to the other. So either, put an X on it or something here that says that's the right side. Take a Sharpie marker, draw a little L or an R on it, because this roller has spent its whole life in this position with tension on it being pulled back to keep the belt tight. If you flip it over, it sounds weird, but the bearings could make some noise because these bearings are used to being in this exact position, rolling in this direction its whole life. So this roller can easily be flipped over. I know it sounds weird, but it's happened multiple times just in our experience. And then you get yourself a noisy roller bearing in a short amount of time, and then you're replacing either bearings in the roller or the whole roller itself. So just save yourself a little bit of hassle and mark the roller left or right. That way it goes right back in the same way it came out. Okay, front roller on this treadmill is kind of a pain, so I want to give you guys a few tips. One, you've got this protection plate here. This plate has to be removed because the head of the Allen bolt that is threaded through the front roller here is underneath of this plate. So you're going to need to get in here with your screwdriver, take out these Phillips head screws here, here, and here, and this is going to move this plate out of the way for you to be able to get an Allen wrench in here. I have seen guys take on a long extension on a socket wrench and they can feed it all the way under the plate into the head of the bolt here. I like to just take this out. Now, come take a look at this right here. This is a front roller that has an adjustment on it. You see this long bolt with this set nut there, a nut on the other side. On the other side of the roller there it is just static. It's a bolt that goes right through.
Shoot, I hit something. Is it hitting my leg?
I don't know what's going on with it.
I must be.
There.
Now it's off again.
Yeah, I think it's just wiggling, so.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll just do here. Is it recording?
Oh yeah, I didn't stop.
Now on this side here, you've got a set bolt, or I'm sorry, not a set bolt, just a hole right in this bracket. So this side of the roller pin isn't going anywhere. That's just sitting where it needs to go. But this has an adjustment. Now, I've also said this in videos before, where if your treadmill belt is running straight from front to back, but just favoring one side or the other, that's a rear roller thing. You can just adjust your rear roller to recenter it. But if it's running crooked from front to back, that means your front roller is not perfectly straight. Think of your front roller as the steering wheel of your car, right? So if your car is driving crooked, you need to correct it with the steering wheel, right? And that's where this adjustment is on this front roller. So before I adjust this rear roller, or take this rear roller off, I should say, I need to mark right where it's at, because the old belt was running perfectly straight, right? So let's leave it there. So what I will do is I will just mark the center of the front roller pin, and the best I can, I'm gonna mark that right there on the frame. So I know when I go to put this back in, I'm gonna line those two lines back up before I tighten up the rear roller. Now I know my front roller is pretty straight. I might need to make a slight adjustment if it's running a little crooked. That's why it's a heck of a lot easier to take this plate off, because that's where you make the adjustment, is right there. I'm gonna already line it up with my line. Make sure you mark this. That's gonna be a real pain. If you ever see a front roller on a treadmill that has an adjustment bolt on it, where it threads through and you can lock it into place with a set nut, before you take it off, mark the pin and the frame in the same spot so you know where you're going when you go to put the new belt back on. So I took out these two screws that hold the plate here, and there's another screw right down here on this end of the bracket. But if you just remove these two screws, this guy will actually just pivot up out of your way. And here's what I'm talking about. Here's your adjustment. There's where your Allen wrench goes in, right there. So you can unthread it this way and it'll just thread out, but you got to take the nut off the back side first. So if you notice while I'm taking that nut out, that's just being pulled through. This bolt doesn't actually thread through this hole, it just fits in there. Now I can back this out. And I'm gonna go out to my truck and I'm gonna actually find my my Allen wrench with the driver end on it so I can just put my socket wrench on there, because sitting here with an Allen wrench is gonna take you a while. Okay, so there's two set nuts on the front roller bolt. You got the back one that holds it into place after it feeds through the hole of the bracket there. And then you got this one here that sits on the inside next to the roller pin. So if you sit here and try to just unthread this bolt, it's pretty tight, because you're not only threading it out of the roller pin, you're threading it through the nut at the same time. That can cause damage to the threading on the bolt. So take your wrench and loosen up this set nut here so it's off of the pin. And then what I like to do is maybe just kind of hold that with your finger, hold him in place while you're threading the bolt out. And now the bolt is easily threading out of the roller pin and through the nut without the nut tight up against the roller pin there. It's gonna take you a half minute or so to get this threaded out all the way. Make sure to clean all the debris off the threads before you thread it out, otherwise you're gonna have all that dust and gunk on the threads and it's gonna go through the roller pin, it's gonna make it harder to thread it out. There you go. Roller pin bolt is out. The nut is just still hanging out on the end of that bolt there, but that's fine because the roller pin is free. Probably should have done this beforehand, but you can just roll your drive belt off. Off he goes. Now we're free. So now you can remove your front roller. So this front roller can be kind of a stinker to get out of there. You know, you gotta lift it up out of there, and it's hitting on this frame here from the upright. It's hitting on this little bracket here where the motor hood seats into. So to how to get this front roller up, you lift on this side where the adjustment pin was, push it over that way, and then it comes out. Also, I've said this in videos before, leave your drive belt hanging on the front roller. Because if you take this off, set it off to the side, you're gonna put this back in, you're gonna put the running belt back on, you're gonna put the obviously you're gonna have the deck on, the rear roller, you're gonna tighten it all up, and then you don't have the drive belt on. And then you gotta take the rear roller off, pull the front roller back out. I know, because I've done it a bunch of times. Leave your drive belt hanging out there on the roller, off to the side, so you won't forget to put it back on when you mount the roller back in the unit. Now it's time to put on our new belt, courtesy of our friends over at the Fitness Graveyard. If you've never checked them out for your parts, you should. We got all the hard parts to find for all the old models. Pretty much all the brands. So, belt on the deck. Come around, sit him down on there, and we're gonna get this. I like to put the deck, the deck on with the belt. Watch your fingers, because it can be a finger smasher. Once you get your deck set on there, make sure your belt slides around nice and freely. You don't have it pinched in there. And you're going to now start to line up your deck bolts back down through. So, got my rear ones here. I can just kind of slide him around until I find the threading. Get him started. Don't ever tighten up any bolts until you get them all started by hand. This hole back here is a hole to nowhere. It doesn't line up with anything. It's just sitting there, hanging out. Gives you plenty of wiggle room too if you need to get the threadings lined up, or the threads to line up. Got those all started. Don't forget, you got nuts on the back side there, which we'll get to once you get everything nice and started. Got the deck tightened up. We're going to put the front roller back in. Front roller always goes back in before the rear roller. Feed him through. Put him in the same way we took it out. Passed. Kind of a stinker to get him out in there. The drive belt also makes for a good little handle so you don't pinch your hand. dropped him down, you're there. Put your front roller pin on this side back in the hole in the bracket. Got our drive belt here, so we're not going to forget him. Put him back on last, that's fine. Now we got to line up our front roller pin again. So now we got to put the front roller pin back in. There again, we're going to line up our marked line right there on the roller pin. I don't know if you can see that on there, and right there on the frame. So this is going to be kind of tricky because you got to hold up the front roller with one hand. You got to thread the bolt in with the other, and this jam nut's going to go along for the ride. This inside jam nut. You got to leave it on there though. So you're going to thread the bolt in a ways, and then you're going to have to thread the nut back out. Kind of a pain, but that jam nut does serve a purpose, so you don't want to remove it. And that's another thing people do is when they remove this front roller pin bolt, they take this jam nut off, they toss it off to the side. Well, then what's going to happen is over time that front roller is going to travel a little bit and your belt's going to run crooked, so you need to leave this jam nut on there. It sucks right now, but in the grand scheme of things, it's worth having on there. Okay, so I know I've spent a lot of time on this front roller here, but it's a pretty vital part, especially on this style of tread. So I've got my line for my front roller pin lined up on the front roller and on the frame here, and I've got this backside nut hand threaded on right here, and I've got my jam nut here threaded on, but neither one of these are tight. We'll tighten these up at the very last step after we get the rear roller on and the belt is snug, because the thing is, you got to remember, this belt is going to pull the front roller back. Well, it can't go back any farther because we're threaded through here. So I need to know if my belt's running crooked, I can freely adjust this bolt without a jam nut already tight. There again, we'll jam it into place when we're done there. The other thing that I've kind of failed to mention up until now, you've got this wire harness that goes up the frame here. So as you're folding this upright back up and down as you're working on this, you'll notice here you've got this little, I don't know, a little horseshoe bracket. That's where these wires sit in, down here. And folding it up and down, you might get lazy, you might have these off to the side, and this can come down and it can crimp that on there and cut your wire harness. So just be aware as you're going up and down, have these on here. You'll also notice there's like a little indentation down in here. Along the way, there should be like a rubber band here, or you can even put a tiny little zip tie in there to keep that from coming out of there. That rubber band always deteriorates and it's usually never there anymore. Okay, so we got the front roller back in place. We're gonna put the rear roller back in. Same side as you marked it, right there. Making sure the belt is kind of right in the center here. It's nice and loose. So we're gonna adjust him later. And we're gonna start the rear roller bolt. Start these by hand. And adjust these evenly. So we've got both of our front roller bolts in. The key here is to pull this back somewhat evenly. You don't want to sit here and thread this whole side in and have this whole front roller cocked like that. It's going to put too much strain on the threads here. So a couple turns here, a couple turns here, just kind of work this front roller back, or this rear roller back into position to where he's kind of snug. So we'll do a couple turns here. turns here. Should be nice and smooth the whole way back. All I'm doing is getting this to a point where I know it's not too tight, but it's going to be snug enough to where I can get the belt to run. And then do a tension test on it as I'm snugging it up here. But I just want it to be snug enough to where it's not dragging on the ground. Also, when I marked the front roller pin to get that right to where it needs to be, I have seen technicians do the same thing on the rear roller pin. I really don't know why. That's pointless, because if you're replacing the belt, a new belt isn't going to be stretched to the point of where the old one was. And what I've seen is technicians mark the rear roller pin with the frame and then try to get that lined up with the new belt on it. And in some cases you might over tighten it, because not every replacement belt is down to the exact measurement of the old one. You might have a 1/4 inch here or there. That's why they make a big adjustment here on the rear roller to fit if you might be off a 1/2 inch or so. So don't worry about marking the rear ones. It's kind of pointless, because you've got to get the tension just right as you fire this thing up. I'll fold this back down. I'm going to put my drive belt on now. Now, when rolling on one of these drive belts, always start it on the smaller pulley and roll it onto the bigger pulley, because you got more surface area here for it to bite the belt. These belts are designed to stretch a little bit. And what I like to do is just get it started, roll it right on, kind of work it back here, make sure it's running nice and straight. You're good to go. This does have an adjustment for the tension on it, where you can adjust the whole motor mount forward and back. And I'm probably going to get cussed a little bit here by the other technicians, why, oh, you should loosen up the motor and put on the belt and then tighten it up. This belt does not need replaced. It's in good shape yet. So we're not putting a new drive belt on this one. If I was putting a new drive belt on, yes, I would loosen up some tension and then put it on and then tighten it back up. But in this case, I rolled the old one off. I'm gonna roll the old one right back on. Plenty snug. There again, when it comes to drive belts, if you can twist the belt and it won't quite go 90 degrees, then you're plenty snug. If it goes past 90, it's too loose. If you can't move it at all, it's probably a little too tight. This is perfect. I can get to about 40. All right, time to power this thing back up. Got my belt started, fairly snug. Now we got to turn it on, and we got to tighten it up to tension here. So it's restarting. It's getting back to home. Treadmill's screwing back down because I had the elevation up, because in moving it, it's easier to move a treadmill around if the elevation is up a little bit. Gives you more front end clearance from the floor. Now, I don't have my bolts in this up right here, so if I'm pulling on this, it might fall down, so I'm just going to be aware of that. I can push it forward all I want. It's not going anywhere. Okay, I started nice and slow, and I don't hear anything rubbing. So that's good. I have it at least tight enough to where it's not like flopping and rubbing all over the place. Now I'm keeping my eye on the rear roller here and the belt. And I want to see if the belt is favoring the left side or the right side. It's favoring the left side a little bit here. Now I know I didn't over tighten this at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this rear pin on the left side a couple turns. And what that's doing is it's bringing the rear roller out this way on this side. So it's coming out. So if this end's coming out, the belt's going to go back over this way a little bit. So you got to find the sweet spot to where it's going to be nice and centered. I I turned it a little bit, it's not going over to the side, so now it stopped going to the side, I should say. So now I'm gonna speed it up to 3 miles an hour. Now I'm just gonna watch for a minute. It's pretty much staying in the same spot. It's not creeping over to the left anymore, but there's far more right roller exposed than there is left roller here. I can just see that from the naked eye. So what I want to do is get it adjusted to where it's right dead center. Give it another about full turn there. Now I'm going to speed it up. The thing you got to remember, the faster the belt is going, the quicker the belt is going to react to an adjustment on the back. So don't crank this thing all the way up to 9 miles an hour and try and adjust your belt for the first time if you don't know if it's way off one side or the next. So right now we're cooking at 5.6 miles an hour, and I'm looking at the belt. It's looking like it's running nice and straight. I got about the same distance up front as I do in the back. So now that I know that the belt is running center, I need to make sure that it's running tight. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna put one bolt back in the upright here because I don't want to pull the upright down on top of me. Just gonna hand thread that through, that way the upright doesn't fall. I'm gonna speed this back down to 3 miles an hour. And I'm gonna walk off. Now, if you've ever done a tension test on here, what I sometimes see people do is they try to step straight down on it. It's hard to get the belt to stop when you step straight down on it. Think of it in terms of water skiing, if you've ever done that, or if you've ever been pulled by something. If you stand straight up and be pulled, you're just going to be pulled over. You typically lean your body back and hold on, and that gives you more leverage. Same thing with testing the tension of a belt. You got to kind of lean back, hold on to the center, and step in front of you. That gives you a little bit of leverage. And if you're watching me do that, the belt stops. But the motor's not stopping. The front roller is still turning. When I step down on the belt, the roller is still turning on the front inside of the belt, but the belt catches. So that means it's not tight enough. Since I know it's centered, provided that I tighten up each side of the rear roller the same amount, the belt should stay centered along the way here. So if you're using a regular Allen wrench like this, if you start it, let's say up here at 11 o'clock, well then you want to be able to turn it all the way back to 11 on both sides and it's a full turn. But sometimes these long Allen wrenches, they hit the floor, so a T-handled one works kind of nice. So right now, let's see, I'm sitting at about 10 o'clock. I'm going to turn it back to there, and I'm going to just do the same thing. This one's at 12. I'm going to make a full turn back to 12. So I've tightened it up the same distance on both sides. Hop back on. Same water ski test. Still slipping a little bit, but not as much, so you know you're on the right track. Do another turn. Equal distance on both sides. Right there. Step down. It's getting harder to get it to stop and slip. So now that I know that it's pretty snug, since the new belts will tend to stretch just a little bit after they're installed, I'm going to go one more turn on this thing. And now it should be plenty snug, nice and tight. Now I'm going to speed it back up, run this thing at about 6-7 miles an hour. I'm going to see if the belt moves side to side. We might have been off just a hair on our adjustments. that is looking and that is sounding really good. Now we're going to put the side saddles back on, just the same way we took them off. Snug them up from the bottom. While I have it turned on its side, don't forget, you got your set nuts here for underneath of the deck. We'll take a look at that here next. So time to slide my saddles back on. You see how those fit right in that groove? So these are spring loaded. You can push from the bolt head up to raise this little bracket here if you need to. Back into place. Okay, right back to where they were. Now we can turn it on its side, put the deck bolt nuts in, and tighten up the saddle hardware. So now that I know that the treadmill belt is running straight and it's not crooked, don't forget to snug up your jam nut here and your set nut on the back side of this front roller. And then we can stop talking about this stupid front roller. Okay, time to put this freaking hood on. I'm not gonna lie, I've been struggling with this for a minute. These hoods kind of suck. So first thing you gotta do is you gotta run your cord through the cord cavity here. Then you've got these pegs that are underneath of the motor hood here. You can see them. These 4 pegs go into these 4 holes is where they need to end up. It keeps the hood from moving around and rattling. But you gotta get the hood up over the uprights here, like that. So you have room to fold this back up. There again, make sure your cord's down here in that little horseshoe bracket, which they are, and you kind of get him back into place. Pull your cord through, and then you just got to play with this hood for a minute to get it all lined up and get those pegs pushed down in the hole. That one I felt snap down in. I don't know if you saw that. That one just did, that one did, that one did. So now they're pushed down into the hole. You still have this top hole here where you got little screw that you would have taken out in the beginning underneath of this cap right here. So now these are lined back up. I can put my little screw back down in there, which is right here, and my cap. And then they're all nice and lined back up. Now the hood's on. I can't tell you how many true motor hoods of this style where this part is busted off because people just pried and didn't realize there's a little screw hiding under this cap right here. Probably should have put that at the beginning of the video. So Right now you might have a busted motor hood, but it's fine as long as you got all the 4 pegs pushed into the hole. I wouldn't worry about it. I'm gonna re-secure my upright bolts. I'm gonna put all 4 of those in. So I'm gonna get all 4 of these nice and tight. I'm gonna re-walk on this. I'd like to say I'm gonna put it through a workout, but I'll make sure the belt's nice and snug. And by the way, if you're looking for a really nice treadmill for sale, this True CS 550 would be a gem. Visit us at treadhero.com. Hey, we're always here to help. And remember, don't just be super duper. Okay, so we're at the tail end of this repair here. I've got the hood back on. Don't forget to put your little covered bracket back on here. This little plastic thing held onto these two screws. It's always good when you're wrapping up a repair or doing anything with a True treadmill. What's cool about these is they have an auto calibration sequence on here. So you remove the safety key, press and hold both incline up and down. While doing that, put the key back in. And then your calibration message comes on. And then you just hit start. Now what the treadmill is gonna do now is it's gonna go through all of its settings automatically. It's gonna go through all of its speed settings, its elevation settings. It's gonna make sure that everything that's supposed to be happening is actually happening. So that's what it's doing right now. There again, press and hold incline up and down, put the safety magnet back on, and then hit start. And right now it's going all the way up, it's gonna go all the way down, it's gonna speed all the way up, it's gonna slow all the way down. And if there's any issues, it's gonna let you know up here on the screen. Let's hope there's no issue.